How's it going, dude? Oh, here we go.
First thing that I did was buy a pack of smokes, checked into a motel and consult my horoscope. Sitting on the bed with my briefcase in my hand, patiently awaiting anyone for my command. Telekinetic, dynamite, psychic warfare is real. You better believe me, brother. X-ray vision, telekinetic, prophetic dynamite. Psychic warfare is real. I know what you're thinking, sister. X-ray vision. Next thing that I did was tap out Laura's code with my wanted nickel on the receiver of the phone. Before I could complete it, I was quickly overtaken.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. Brutal Honesty here. Well, that was X-Ray Visions by Clutch from Psychic Warfare. And yes, psychic warfare is very real. And it's even taken next level steps in terms of dimensions and threats towards humanity, let's just say, as we discovered yesterday, and many others that have discovered along the way of their courses of research. So yeah, we're going to get into a lot of topics today. Hey, thanks, Black Eye Viking. Glad you're with me. It's good stuff. Yeah, so it's cool. I'm glad to be getting all the love that people are popping out and appreciating the time and effort and the work that we're doing to level with humanity and to really to let you know we're not in this alone. We have 7 billion worldwide, and really it's a matter of us realizing that and coming together and representing what it is we need in terms of hierarchy of needs or things of this nature. And really, I think it's up to us to force the elites to join into our side with our majorities, and to render their offering obsolete or at least insignificant, because it is definitely unsustainable. And it's something that's been developed and constructed upon the growth models that they provided, the mass production GDP enterprises that they've delivered, the industrializations that they put upon us. And of course, after a century of this industrialization, now all of a sudden these are the guys running around lecturing everybody about carbon emissions and scaling these things back, and of course using it as a shakedown tactic to basically prevent any sort of competition. The same way they've done with just about any sort of commodity or resource that they've ever controlled, including labor. So that's probably why a lot of the labor unions have been disrupted by, let's just say, agent provocateurs and operatives in the way that it has been, historically speaking. And I've done dozens of videos about that. I guess you can go to my archives at Brutal Honesty on BitChute and try to find what's left there. I've been purged from YouTube and the digital Holocaust, as many know. And I have to think that this whole push for technocracy and the replacement of interpersonal contact and eye to eye and talking and conversations and handshakes and things where you can look someone in the eye and know that it, if they say something, it has meaning to it. This has been replaced by the cloak and dagger type play in the digital dark alleys of information. And of course, the nameless, faceless bots can come out of nowhere and strike with the greatest of ease and the utmost of efficiency. And really, all people are created equal, and the sensors are created above all. So it's kind of interesting how the concept of digital devices and texting and things like this do in fact create dehumanizing social engineered situations, we'll say, a lot of times you can't tell context or understand a reference in terms of texting someone. A lot of digital autists when it comes to this, because most people don't understand punctuation or haven't been educated through Common Core schools in a way to really represent the English language in a comprehensive manner. And of course, convenience and all these things that we see in the face of this. And then, of course, you got the emojis, instead of actual words. And from there, it's pretty much downhill and a slippery slope. So yeah, it's hard to really guess someone's vibe when they're coming off from a text. I'm sure everyone can relate to that. It's almost you got to psychoanalyze everyone by their character and even by their grammar or emojis or context or punctuation. So yeah, it's interesting to see these things replacing interpersonal contact. And even like the concept of financial credit scores have gone to the next level with social media in terms of social credit score. And the universal basic income and the desolation of labor, pushing people towards this system of a social credit score and a compliance system. Wow, I guess at some point in time you got to wonder if this will include any sense of justice, or if this is just going to be an extortion and a punishment mechanism on the common man, while the elite celebrate a second tier of legal protection and plunder and things of this nature. So I really think it's essential to point out, as I did earlier on Scorpio's show today, about how they've often used the Masonic orders and these departmentalized mercenary forces in many ways, outlaws and even lawmen, for that matter, to settle the Wild West for the sake of resource extraction, and even creating the Civil War so that railroads can be put throughout the entire national infrastructure and then utilized by the privateers in the manner which it has been. Just about any sort of technocracy or military device that's been developed has been used under these pretenses, whether it's the telegraph onto the cell phone or the railroad onto what we're seeing now with the airline industries and things like that. And speaking of airline industries and the intelligence industries and big data, this brings me to Howard Hughes and his creation of Intertel. And it was one of the precursors and one of the parallel infrastructures of like TRW, which is in fact one of the big three credit score companies. And most people fail to understand that. And this is where the Mormon Mafia takes over and does a lot of stuff with this as agents for London, as many are starting to realize. So yeah, it's kind of tough for these guys to put the genie back in the bottle after so much has been revealed by people like myself and others that know better. And better yet, in the face of this, to see them literally gaslight people that may not be certain or may not have the same levels of research as those of us that are really trying to bring the truth to you. So it's good to see them really squirming in their chairs, because the truth shall set us free and it shall put them in chains. And I will have to say that censorship and violence and things like this, these are not things that the truth does. This is not things that innocent people do. The surveillance state, this is not the nature of an innocent relationship. This is the nature of an abusive one. And it's certainly not one towards, public servants and the constituency. This is more like master and slave. And it's certainly not the politicians serving us as slaves, that's for sure. So you really got to wonder what's going on with your tax dollars. And better yet, as you start to ascertain these multiple soft kill measures and these military operations and these economic operations and asset stripping endeavors to really make people dependent and compliant upon the state for their salvation. Once you realize that the efforts of these people and the structures of this and how it's trying to foster create and then foster a sense of dependency up unto extermination, really, and replace human labor with what we're saying as android robotics, and arguably speaking, they're trying to stalemate us or at least filibuster our outrage until the Boston Dynamic Army can be assembled and completed and dispatched against humanity, I'm sure. So, what better way to do this than not even firing a shot? Why not send out a biowarfare weapon, muck the confusion as far as where the accountability lies, and better yet, really just control the conversation into complete absurdities, where you start quarantining the healthy, you start using a PCR test with an 85+% false positive rate to find a virus that you can't even isolate, and then you deliver a vaccine for said virus that cannot even be isolated in a lab. So you really got to wonder what's going on here. And then you get into the next level of RNA recombinants and adjuvants and things that are in these vaccines that are pure toxins and things that can alter your DNA and your RNA. And better yet, think about the intellectual property concerns that could be raised from these pioneers, we'll just say. And look at what they've done historically, say with other investment endeavors like Monsanto or even Microsoft or things of the nature, where you're pretty much renting a antivirus from Norton or McAfee or something like that, or in a Monsanto crop, you're using 2,4-D and glyphosate and things of this nature to fight drought and pest. And more importantly, you're putting a synthetic product out in the place of an heirloom one, and you're putting a technocracy in place of human contact, something that's been around for thousands of years. It's been the crucial pinnacle of all human civilizations, and in fact, the entire essence of the social contract that we supposedly uphold in all civilizations. And the primary underlying factor of this social contract is the concept of justice. And at what point in time will justice be served for the common man? And at what point in time will justice be avoided by these oligarchs and these robber barons that have been trying to control every aspect of life and make themselves not only the indispensable facets, but the slave masters, we shall say. And I don't think I'm being dramatic or using hyperbole in this appraisal. What do you do with that? Especially when you see their historic bloodline tactics throughout time and history in the same formula, just by different mechanisms and of course, symbols and following the money, the power, the bloodline in the way that you can and most should, but most do not. When you follow these things back and trace these people to the same origins and to the same groups, and you see what they're trying to do now with the UN and their proxies and the way that they're really trying to put this technocratic feudalism and this slave state back on humanity, while inverting it under the guise of liberty, which is truly the ultimate devil's trick. So I have to say, this is such a diabolical plan that I don't think it's capable of any normal human to come up with these type of sinister offerings and these contracts and using the law in such a sense as a hammer and shield. And just like I say with the Monsanto thing, to go back to that, I remember what they were doing with Mexican and Indian and farmers around the world, we'll just say, with seed patent laws and cross-pollination suits. So the people that are organic heirloom farmers, they're basically their produce or their products get cross-contaminated through wind or through bees or through anything with a Monsanto product. And then, of course, a Monsanto patent lawyer comes through and tests their crop, finds a trace element of their toxin and says, hey, you know what, this is our poison. How dare you sell this to people as food without paying us accordingly? And of course, they sue them for astronomical amounts for trying to violate the patent and for punitive damages and things like this. So most of these farmers have to sell their farms and either bend the knee and join the Monsanto parallel infrastructure and then start putting out Monsanto products instead of heirloom ones. And then, of course, they are those souls responsible for the distribution and the dispensation of said poisons. And there you get the people of Walmart. And, God bless them. I'm not trying to be a dick here and harp on these people. I think that if anything, when everybody realizes what has been done and what has been offered under the guise of safety, I think that they're going to be shoving me out of the way to get after these people. And I really say that, like most tyrants use the alibi of safety to get what they want and to do what they're doing. And in most cases, it is an inversion of perception. And I don't think this is any different. I think this is really becoming painfully evident. And this is usually the thing what authority does when you question the logical breakdowns of their fallacies and their fairy tales, as they respond with force, because they really don't want you to have a choice. They want to present you with the illusion of choice, to cooperate or suffer, to join or die. And they'll conquer by the cross and the sword or by the inversion and the lie. And better yet, they'll start indoctrinating people to not only learn the lie, to live the lie, and worst of all, to teach the lie to their children. So like Roberto Galliano said, in the veins of South America, I really think that is the worst sin. And really, I think standing up for the truth, as many whistleblowers and honorable people have been doing, and summoning the integrity that is required. Let's just say if we're having this reset, why don't we just do it the right way and just step away from this whole thing altogether? Jubilee, all debts free and clear. Null and void because they've been put under people under duress and under illusion and deception and by pretenses of fraud and much worse. So Yeah, they have not only been failed by the people that they put in positions of trust with fiduciary duties and oaths and obligations and public service contracts, but they've been betrayed. And the same can go for the medical industry, because it's the same people that have infiltrated it with their lobbying and with their financial corruption, and have made this corruption the basis of basically of their success. And doctors, I say, are really manipulated by their egos, because many times that will replace your intellect in terms of convenience. And I just have to say that is really another thing too, that they have really exchanged the diligence that is required to protect freedom in exchange for the convenience which they offer. And I tell you, America has lapsed and has really underestimated the demiurge in this type of thing, and has fallen asleep to a certain extent. And of course, these generations are being woken up, oh man, all horribly at the same time. And you're starting to realize that really you don't really get to dictate the terms or the deals if you make a deal with the devil. And your best deal or your best bet is to do nothing, to not sign the deal, to not take their offer, because ultimately everything that they'll deliver will be an inversion or a trap, or completely a failure of what your expectation will be. And they'll get what they want, and you'll be just used. So that's really the thing. I hear a lot of people that maybe look at me and say, hey, well, the Masons aren't involved with this, or the Jews aren't involved with this, or the Royals aren't involved with this. And I have to say, in many cases, these people are probably affiliated with some of these organizations and at lower innocuous departmentalized levels. And they probably see them as really, harmless old people and friendly looking folk. And they can't probably ever figure out what they lived to be over a century, every one of them. But and we drop at age 60 or whatever it might be. But I digress. We'll go on with that. But they really look at these people and say, oh well, they couldn't possibly be them. They run all these charities, they run all these nice things, these philanthropies, and really they're honorable and they're gentlemen, and they have the gentleman's agreement. And of course, really it's a scumbag alliance, and they're mutually bonded by the notion of self-interest and guilt. And in this case, anybody that really turns out in terms of against this, or reveals the secrets against this, they will in turn all jackal up on that person. And they really tried to lend that optic towards Donald Trump. Whether it was legitimate or not, I can't quite speculate. But I think that the common man knows that. And I think they have Cambridge Analytics. And I think that they know what people are really aware of and maybe not. And I think that is part of the fuel for the theatrics, the Shakespearean wrestling script that we're all facing. And what really brings them to these theatrics, the London Theatre Company, the way they always have. And you got to look into this, because these guys are all members of secret societies. They're all involved with military operations. They're all involved with social engineering. They're all involved with, like I said, Ivy League schools in most cases, or and more importantly, with bloodlines. So that's really the thing. It may not always be the same last name. They could be maternal or cadet branches or things like that. But ultimately, they know who they are, and we're the ones who really don't know who they are. And they certainly don't represent what they propose publicly, we'll just say. In all cases, it seems like they have an oath to something higher than that of the people or the country or the Constitution. And well, really, I think this is what the original 13th Amendment was all about. And we're going to bring some heavy hitters on tonight. I got a guy named Mike Gaddy, the Rebel Madman, who's going to break it down, and we're going to get into some good stuff here. And I got Colonel Herman with me too, and I got Giuseppe and Dave Scorpio. So let's let it rip tonight, guys. I think we got some good stuff to talk about, and more importantly, history is one thing, but what do we do moving forward? Because I think that is the most crucial thing that we need to focus on. So, guys, you want to go around the horn here and let it rip with a little intro and respond? Get it.
You take it, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, guys. I was thinking this afternoon, what would be the effect in this country today? And I realize this is just off the top of my head, but what would happen if the people who really care about being free and having liberty if they said, okay, we're sitting down for 72 hours, we're not going anywhere, we're not driving trucks, we're not going to the store, we're not going to work, we're not doing anything, what effect would that have on the government and its operations?
They
Mike,
stop paying
I would
taxes.
just say that here in Ecuador, they have a thing called a paro, where the indigenous and other people say, we're going to shut the whole country down. Nobody works, nobody buy anything. We're going to block off the freeways, and there's going to be nothing happening until the president agrees to forget about the International Monetary Fund plans to put restrictions on the people and austerity. And it seemed to work. The president went into hiding like a coward, and within a week or two, it was all over with.
Yeah.
I'm Carl Herman. I'm a high school historian and mathematician. And moving forward, I don't think that we have any hope at all until the American public wake up and they mature enough so that they demand arrest of these parasites. We can quantify the damages that these policies centered in war, money, and lying annually kill millions, harm billions, and loot trillions. So until the American public can grow up and see beyond the BS that's peddled for factual information when it's such transparent propaganda, we're going to be stuck in a vicious cycle. And with your introduction, Chris, of your points of slavery and bloodlines and that they're not human, as a professional historian, I got a lot I could say about that if you guys are interested.
Let it rip, man. Go for it. I'm sure everybody here probably can even add to the conversation to some levels, because this is really a fascinating topic and it's really getting ripped open all at once. And well, I guess it's good to have a lot of eyes and a lot of logical sense on this.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to say before I jump in on this one point?
Well, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Giuseppe Vafanculo, and I'm a government contracted COVID anal swabber.
I almost spit out my drink at that one, man.
So what do you call them? Klaus Anal Schwab?
Hold on, I have a picture of that.
That's terrible. But yeah, that's pretty messed up, man. This guy looks like Bernie Madoff a little bit, doesn't he?
Yeah. You're getting it in the same place with both of them.
Yeah. Wow. But yeah, Carl, if you want to take it from here, man, let it rip. Or unless Scorpio or Giuseppe, you guys want to jump in with anything to add?
One thing I'd like to add to your awesome intro when you let it rip is that in addition to the even ahead of the Boston Robotics marching robot soldiers of doom is I read an article yesterday where a general lamented that there's already no way humans can overcome a swarming attack group of drones. They can wipe out any type of soldier infantry already. That's crazy stuff.
I don't doubt it, man. These guys work hard to figure out how to kill us quicker.
Yeah.
Well, as they say, pride cometh before the fall.
Yeah, good point. All right, so Carl, you want to take it somewhere good from here?
Yeah. So, Chris, when you were talking about slavery, that people need to know that that is probably the most accurate historical description of what's going on. That we are an owned livestock class. You have to definitely throw out the idea that we're a constitutional, just in the United States, a constitutional republic with limited government when you can demonstrate that most of the Bill of Rights is gone and we are being played and manipulated by these people committing provable war crimes with lie-started illegal wars of aggression. And if you want the documentation for this, I do have published research. If you look up Carl Herman, CarlHerman, and Red Pill 101 is a recent article I put in there to try to frame what I'm responding to with this. So slavery, you get into these people who have the divine right of kings. They say that they're God's chosen one. And you have this bloodline, and all the presidents are connected through these bloodlines. And these bloodlines go back, if you go back to our earliest historical understanding of this, let's take Egypt, where it was forbidden to look upon the face of the ruler. And then if you talk about, as you mentioned, Chris, that somehow these people are not human, they certainly have a lack of empathy that we can identify. That for ordinary people, the idea of a lie-started illegal war of aggression or war murdering or poverty murdering millions, that would be repulsive. But somehow these people are okay about it. So if they're not human and these bloodlines go back, and then you take a look at the type of people who were in charge of the bloodlines in Egypt, where they have these depictions of these long skulls, and then you go across the Atlantic into Peru, where you have the rulership class with these long skulls, and then you go back to the most ancient history we have, which is in Sumeria, where they claim as their history that their civilization was founded by these literal beings who came from the skies. So I'm going to pause there, because as a professional historian with 44 years engagement in civic activism, almost immediately up to the highest levels of government on this planet that led to 2 UN summits for heads of state, is that I think that we're on a right path by considering that we have been hijacked as a species. And the hijacking gets more bizarre the more you look back at the actual history and the physical evidence.
Well, the truth is stranger than fiction, because really fiction has to make sense.
That's true. Anybody else want to say something? I can go the next cut.
Oh, man, this is awesome stuff. I'm digging it. I want to add to this. Like, there's records of, like, say, copper from the Great Lakes being mined from there and traded to the Mediterranean civilization. So, 2700 BC, the Phoenicians or whatever, pre-Phoenicians or Minoans, whatever you want to call them, were trading up there with the natives in North and South America, and probably in the Orient as well. So a lot of different, geographic specific, unique things that were found from these foreign places. And the only way they could have got there is by trading with these far off lands.
Yeah, there's a whole, the best documentation I know of is in a book called Forbidden Archaeology. And this is Michael Cremo, Cremo. And he documents as well, I think about no, it's not a dozen. I don't know. Maybe it is up to a dozen of professional archaeologists and scientists who, when they find these out of place artifacts that destroy the timeline that we're given of civilization arising in the Mideast, maybe 6,000 years ago, that these people, if they find refutation of that with artifacts older than the timeline, they are blacklisted. And and it doesn't matter how good they are with being able to prove it. So as a history teacher, I with my students, I learned to bribe them by saying, hey, because it's my job to produce learning. And I measure the learning. I also am credentialed in mathematics. I measure learning based on how they do on well-designed assessments, which basically, can they tell a story of what happened with history, but with the corrections that I implement. And then I tell them, hey, you know what? If you get ahead a little bit and you're doing well, I'll do a unit of history on anything you want to know. I mean, so really, if you could have any question answered in history, the entire history of planet Earth, what would you want to know? And this usually takes like 3 days for them to, and I put it up on the board for all the classes to see, so they kind of network. And over the years, actually over a decade, there were 4 principal questions that high school students, juniors and sophomores in world history and US history, wanted to know. Now, you guys want to guess that and we really considered this. Like, what would you most want to know? I'll teach it. I'll give you the best that historians have for who did what, where, when, and what other evidence might help you with why. What do you think the 4 topics were? Universally.
Let it rip, man. The suspense is killing me.
Okay, I'll bleed them out one at a time. I'll give you the one that is no longer mentioned because it's dated. But this one, I mean, again, 4. Always these 4. Every year, all locations, because I got my ass fired 4 times as well for teaching this stuff without, they came up with, anyway. So the oldest question that was removed is, who assassinated President Kennedy? What happened with that? And then our friend and colleague, Jim Fetzer, is one of the best at being able to detail a lot of the facts. And another guy who, so I would answer that one with the evidence from retired advanced placement history teacher John Hankey and his work. Oh my goodness, what was his documentary? I got to look it up and give it to you, because this was by far, I would show students in history classes about 100 video clips just to get a sense of some of the events. And this one from John Hankey universally was the favorite of students, and Dark Legacy is the name of that documentary. Have any of you guys seen it? Dark Legacy?
Yeah,
I've seen it. He did. He's done multiple documentaries. He's very good.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Part 2 about Kennedy's kid getting whacked, really good as well. Did you see Dark Legacy 2?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
He does a really good job. Now, getting back to your earlier fascinating statement, Carl, I've been enjoyed following a guy who constantly gets kicked off of YouTube and Twitter. He goes by the handle Asha Logos. He's very good. I love Dr. Michael Cremo, and there's a woman who I can't think of her name. She's like a female Michael Cremo and has come up with so much stuff, and she's gotten blackballed by the archaeological industry. But this guy, Asha Logos, makes a very compelling, I saw a documentary he did where the original statue of Buddha was an Aryan, a white guy, and it used to be all around, and they've systematically been suppressing who the actual Buddha was and turning him into an Asian. Have you come across that one?
Wow, no, that's new for me. But
yeah, really believable. I mean, it's not off the chain at all.
I believe that because if you look at the original inhabitants of the place where he come from, that walled city of Xinjiang, the original inhabitants did have some blonde hair and blue eyes, and they were technically Oriental or Asiatic more. This is a couple thousand years BC, but yeah, interesting how that comes together, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Indian too.
So for the 4 topics, so we got who killed JFK is one. Any other guesses of what high schoolers would say if they could really think about
I'd say the moon landing's got to be there.
I'd say 9/11.
Yeah.
9/11.
Yeah.
9/11 is one of them. The moon, no, and it's only because I was such a dumbass when I was doing that. I hadn't come across that research, but that also was a good one. So 9/11 was great, and I created a lesson for that in 2005 based upon the leading work of, David Ray Griffin. Have you read any of his stuff?
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah.
He's known as the dean of 9/11 conspiracy theories, essentially.
Yeah, he's written like a dozen books. Such a brilliant writer. And he is among the cohorts in the Claremont colleges. And I was invited to give a couple of presentations to international economics conferences there and met him. And talking, the guy is about as boring as you could possibly imagine, but he's the most brilliant, cogent writer with absolute perfection in academics to be able to document it. So who did 9/11? I'd walk the students through that, and I would tell them, okay, so here's the government's explanation, and walk them through that with some official news clips, and all the students would nod their heads and says, yeah, we know that. I said, okay, but here's the part that you don't know. And then, so these are just teenagers who want to know, and they're captured in the room, right? About 2/3 of the students, year after year, would come to the conclusion with their jaws dropped, and they'd say, oh my God, we've been so lied to. It's just so obvious right there. And the final third would look at it, and they would be too stupefied to respond. They had no factual way to say anything back. But they couldn't. They were like paralyzed from
like shell shock.
Yeah, they were shocked. Exactly. So JFK was one, but that dropped off. 9/11 is another. Any other guesses of the other 2?
The Holocaust.
Got to be Hitler, maybe Holocaust. Yeah, something.
No, I was too dumb on the Holocaust at that time. You're close. The other one was was Jesus real?
Oh, of course.
Of
Yeah,
course. Yeah. And that's exactly, and Giuseppe said, when somebody would raise the question, everyone would say, yeah, that one, that one, that one, that one. And I don't know if you guys know, but Jesus, among professional historians, he is the most studied individual in history from professional historians. And then it's a pretty simple process because so many people have done it. And because I was personally curious, I mean, think about the irony of this, gentleman. So many Americans, especially Americans, consider Christianity to be the most important thing in their life, but they don't know jack about the history. So there's a total disconnect of applying some academic tools just to see, well, to at least give a chance of what do historians say about who did what, when, where, and what other objective evidence can help with the subjective evidence of why. And in this case, we only have these sources that popped up at various times of history of the New Testament. And those were founded in Rome. And in chronological order, you see the progression of a story where in the book of Mark, I believe, I haven't talked about this in a long time, so I hope that the details aren't done, but I can do this in like 2 minutes. So the very first story was of a Jewish guy believing in the coming of an apocalypse and predicting the coming of the Son of Man, which in their religion was someone to come and turn the evil on its head. And he was predicting this. So he was kind of a Jewish rebel. That story evolves to the latest story of John, where Jesus himself becomes the Christ. And then in the book, there's controversy. There's a conflict about when did Jesus even die? Was it on the day before the Sabbath, or was it on Sabbath? Was it at 8 a.m. or noon? Because it's contradictory. So the evidence for what actually happened with that kind of raises in the air of whether this guy even existed or not. And the students, of course, are on the edge of their seats with that because this is not taught. I mean, did you guys know any of this with the professional historical consideration of these sources for Christianity?
Yeah, I've studied the crap out of this, man. I've been kicked out of Catholic school and stuff for telling this. Have you ever looked into like the Jesus that was the temple priest in the Hasmonean Empire under Antiochus IV, and like the purge that went on with that, and the civil war between the Maccabean revolt and like the schism supposedly between the Jewish faith and like the new covenant between Hellenized Judaism and the traditional Judaism?
No, that's beyond my scope. What do you got, brother?
Yeah, like 175 BC, there was a temple priest named Jason, was his Greek Hellenized name, but his real name was Yeshua or Jesus, and he was a temple priest that actually bribed Antiochus IV, and then another guy came along and out-bribed him and basically ran him out. So yeah, I think that really, as far as like that whole concept goes, there's no mention of Jesus by any contemporary writers or any historians. Very similar to like the nation of Israel in the time of David or Solomon. There's anything around the empire and around the situation, there's no mention of this. And in this place, should be tons of this stuff. And arguably speaking, there's no historic context as to when this happened. So you could be looking 200 years before or 100 years after AD. And look when the first New Testaments were supposedly written by like Flavius Titus Clemens of Alexandria and some of these other first Christian authors. They were Jews, and they were pushing this new version of Judaism and Christianity is what that was. So like, I know a lot of people get butthurt about that, but I think it's something that's like an older Masonic confabulation that comes out of the Vatican. And really, I think that's a big part of the schism between the Byzantine and the Vatican later on, and really the rise of the Templars and the Freemasons out of that.
Yeah. There was Pliny the Younger wrote an account, and he described communications, or he was involved in the communications between the emperor and a part in the eastern part of the empire when it was still one empire. And they do mention Jesus, but only as a footnote, saying, yeah, there was this rebel and we executed him, and that was it. So you would think if there was some guy doing miracles, and somebody would have some documentation of it, but it's just not the case. And then you really got to take into account the reliability or the unreliability, the hypocrisy of the Vatican, saying they're in this main hall that looks like a serpent. They have this in the main hall for the Pope. There's this statue thing that looks like demons behind him. And they say that, you need to give away all of your money to the poor, while they have the richest crib in creation, and God knows what they have underground in those vaults. So,
and the Pope wears a yarmulke too.
Yeah, and some of them have pedophilia symbols on their clothes, along with wearing the red shoes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So so that's 3 of them there. So there's the last topic that students always address, which was my connection to what you were talking about. So they wanted to know about what happened on 9/11, what happened at JFK, but that kind of got pushed off. They all wanted to know about Jesus. And then the last question is connected to Jesus. Any guess?
The Shroud of Turin?
No, although that's
Mary
a fascinating thing too. No.
The Da Vinci Code stuff.
I'll give you a clue. So Chris, you said at the beginning that somehow our leaders are not human. So if they're not human, what might they be?
Oh, aliens. Did aliens visit the earth then?
Exactly. And then as Giuseppe said it, all the students would say, oh yeah. So are they real? And when students asked that, for a couple of years, I dodged it because I hadn't looked. But because students demanded it, I said, all right, I'll look. And then, man, you find so much. I wrote in the Red Pill 101 article, the principal proof that I have is that we can say for absolute certain that advanced civilizations existed on Earth because the evidence is rock solid. We have megalithic architecture with ancient buildings built with stones over 1,000 tons. We cannot quarry that. We could lift it up, but then we can't transport that. And then to build with it where the blocks are placed with such precision that you cannot put a piece of paper between the blocks.
Yeah.
So the stone,
Carl, most of these things are quarried like 600, 800 miles away from the places where they're built at too. So that's another interesting thing. Like logistically, that would be impossible by today's means.
Yes. In addition, that stone, this megalithic stone, is machined more finely, more polished, more finished, more perfectly than we can today. And the best evidence that I have with that, if I can remember this guy, he is a retired he's a tool engineer, and he spent like 40 years working with precision cutting in stone and
Christopher
metal.
Dunn, I think.
Yep, that's the guy. So he looked at the Serapeum in Egypt, where you have these 100-ton boxes that's cut from one stone, one black granite stone, 100 tons. So the dimensions of this is approximately 15 feet long by maybe 10 feet wide by maybe 8 feet high. And what he did, what Christopher Dunn did, is he called the best stone cutters in the world, the most well-known companies, and he lied to them. He said, look, I'm representing very wealthy buyers, and they want a duplicate of one of these Egyptian boxes. He doesn't care how much it costs, but he wants to know, can you do it? Can you do one of these things with one stone, and how much would you charge? And all the manufacturers said, no. We could do the same thing with 6 separate blocks and then put them together in such a way there would be no visible defect, but we cannot do that. So it's cut with greater precision. And the third absolute evidence that, again, is Christopher Dunn, is that the rock, if you go to Egypt and you look, there are tube drill holes, hundreds of them. And on some of the stone, there is evidence of a circular saw. And Christopher Dunn calculated that this circular saw, that on one of them was 18 feet across in diameter.
Wow.
Yeah. And then these tube drills, which I have one of those. I have a tube drill. I've done that indoors. So, but the rate of removal of this hard stone is 50 times faster than our best tools today, according to Christopher Dunn. So whoever these people were who demanded absolute allegiance of their people, like, don't even look at their face or we're going to cut your head off right here. Maybe those are the inhuman hyper intelligent beings who came in and hijacked our planet and then came up with this very clever financial system to have exponential and increasing debt owed back to them. And they can, and once they control the money, they buy whatever they want. They pay their minions, they enrich themselves, they buy up the media. And then again, there's a lot of evidence, jumping to one further topic before I shut up for a moment here, is that the human DNA was manipulated to make us far more pliable and submissive.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Have you looked into like the missing link and like some of the things that have jumped from that as far as cranial capacity and like some of the developments that have happened and how there seems to be such a massive jump between the things the lower Dryas and then the post Dryas, basically the last ice age of 10,000 BC and the technology and the jump up in terms of human cognitive abilities?
I haven't done a deep dive into that at all.
It's pretty astonishing because there has to be something that they can't account for in terms of evolution. It has to be some sort of intelligent design or interference. And really, as far as you're saying, it fully supports what you're commenting on here completely.
There's a guy named, I'm not sure of the first name, but it's Mike Braden, Bradden, who is a scientist. And he takes a look at the genetics and that the evidence of in the human genome of a splice of a specific gene that is the evidence of somebody coming in and manipulating our DNA.
Wild stuff. So, hey, Mike, are you still with us? All right. I don't know if he is or not, but
He's muted.
Scorpio, do you want to jump in?
Mike's muted.
Okay.
Are you there, Mike?
He might have stepped away for a minute. Scorpio, you want to jump in, or you want Carl? You want to keep going?
No, you guys go ahead.
Okay. All right, I got more. So now,
there he is. Mike's there now.
That's okay. Go ahead, guys. I'm enjoying listening.
Okay, man.
All
We
right.
want to deal you in and hear what you had to say too. Okay, that's cool. We'll come back to you.
Well, let me ask Mike a quick question. Mike, in your studies of history, have you come across any bizarre sightings or off-the-cuff mentions, especially around revolutionary times, of something very peculiar that somebody saw and they wrote about it?
No, there's not a lot of evidence of that I can find at all. There have been a couple of, I go back to the Civil War era and the Battle of Fredericksburg. And that night, there was in December, when the Northern Lights made an appearance to the south much farther than ever recorded.
that must have freaked out the soldiers.
Oh, quite a bit, especially at that time. Of course, Burnside made an idiotic charge up Marie's Heights and was just cut to pieces. And the field was littered with wounded men and dead men, and even the Southerners were going out trying to take water to the wounded Yankees. And then all of a sudden, you had this huge display of the Northern Lights, and everyone was in awe.
Huh. Wild stuff. Man, I've been looking into some interesting stuff, Mike, about a guy named Sheridan that was involved with the Union Army. And he was like one of the guys that was in the Scorched Earth campaign down in the South, I guess. And then afterwards was involved with like some of the firefighting efforts in like the Great Fire of Chicago and then the fires of 1872 and 73. I almost think that this fire and this arson comes along with like this reset or the Scorched Earth policy where these robber barons want to move in and take some land and build up on top of it and put the new things in, like in the case of Chicago, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, or many things like that. Or you can think of like 3 or 4 times where they've done it to New York or, other cities like that. So it's kind of interesting. It's like a motive of like, say, Rothschild and like, say, with Garibaldi and Mazzini and some of them, and like some of the outlaws that they used out in the Wild West to settle for Rothschild or Rockefeller mining companies. they used a similar scorched earth tactic to not only get the Indians out, but also competitors. So what are your thoughts on some of those type of concepts? You got any thing you can share with us?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Chris, because uh, Sherman's march to the sea, basically from Chattanooga area in Tennessee all the way to Savannah, Georgia, is listed as the fourth worst ecological disaster in the history of the planet.
Wow.
And then you talked about Sheridan. Of course, he was doing scorched earth in the Shenandoah Valley at the same time.
Yeah.
And the reports that they sent back, which are in the National Archives, about the old thing: if a crow passes over, he'll have to carry his own lunch, because they left nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing in the Shenandoah Valley or across the state of Georgia.
Wow. Wow.
And
Yeah, it
Sheridan,
reminds me of like what they're doing maybe in California now with these fires and trying to clear land for like this land deal with Rothschild or China or whatever they got going maybe.
well, I have a very good friend who's retired from the U.S. Forest Service, and we talked about those fires in California last year to a great extent. And he said that all of his older associates that he had spoken with, and everyone, they all believe that those were set intentionally and set from possibly they have a kind of a laser type that they can use, and that the fact that so many of those fires were started within minutes of each other at very different locations leads a lot of people to question exactly how this came about. It was no accident. These were done on purpose. And, there's so many things that they can do to control, which ends up controlling the food supplies and other items that leads us into quite a problem. But going back to Sheridan, Sheridan was heavily involved in the decimation of the American Indian. And he was the one who said the only good Indian he ever saw was dead.
Yeah, and about those California fires, there's many pictures that I've seen where you have green trees not 10, 20 feet away from a house that was completely turned to white ash. Even the toilets and sinks were burned in this extremely hot fire, yet there's a green tree right next to it. So something is seriously off about those fires.
I agree.
That's almost like the pictures, the early pictures. And I have a good friend who was actually in the Pentagon on 9/11, and she was in charge of the Far Eastern desk at the time. And she went outside after the Pentagon was hit with a cruise missile. Some people can call it an airplane if they want to, but she brought up. I talked with her that night, and she said there was no plane hit this building.
Yeah.
And very shortly after that, she retired. Probably before any word of that got out to anyone, but it was. She said that there was she talked about a fan blade housing, and she said the blade housing that was found would not be anywhere near a 757. And of course, you guys are familiar with DW, my pilot friend, who said that to do those aeronautics to hit the Pentagon would have broken a 757 apart. That the G forces, there's no way that could have happened.
Yeah, and also this so-called plane crashed into a light pole, maybe 100 yards before the building. The plane would have exploded right there because a lot of the fuel in an airplane is stored in the wings. So the idea that this plane hit a light post and then continued on without catching on fire is absurd in the extreme.
And the most heavily surveilled property on Earth has no footage at all, other than a Citgo station still photo, and that's one picture.
Well, gentlemen, I spent some time at the Puzzle Palace, the building with 4 walls and a spare. And there are cameras, and this was 30 years ago. There were cameras every 17 feet. There was no way anyone got anywhere near that. And then for them to say, as you said, Chris, they have one photo, which really isn't of a plane.
Right.
No, it's
There's
not.
no discernible picture of a plane there at all. And then, especially not to be redundant, but my friend Darrell Wayne, of course, he's friends with you guys as well.
Yeah,
But
he's good. Dude.
his knowledge and the fact that they went into the training centers at Hart Field in Atlanta and went into the actual what do they call those things? Help me out here, guys. But anyway,
Simulator?
flight simulators, and he and 4 other trainers of aircraft of commercial airliners tried repeatedly to hit the World Trade Center, setting it up on their computers, and none of these men with thousands of hours of flying experience could hit the World Trade Center.
Ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding, ding,
flight
ding.
simulator. Yeah.
You know, I
Phil
like to
Marshall said
interject
the same thing.
for a second, which is I find the idea of directed energy weapons far more believable with the California fire. And then half a year before, what they did is they cut a swath through Australia the same way, same pictures. So they were definitely testing something out and making a point than I do of a directed energy weapon for the Twin Towers. But if you do some research, there are the exact same pictures out of Australia that there are of the California forest of things just turned to white ash and then a green tree not 5 feet from it.
Yeah, clear line. If people want to hear some expert testimony, I've printed interviews with retired fire captain John Lord, Lord, who went with another retired fire captain personally to those fire sites with pictures. And he gives an expert analysis that what the evidence that they saw on the ground is impossible other than from some sort of exotic weapon causing temperatures that are impossible for any ordinary fire on the ground. This is added heat that only can be explained from an external source, the same way talking about 9/11, the only way that you can transform an office building into dust of a particular size is by the addition of energy that is not explained other than by some sort of controlled demolition.
Carl, are you familiar with now deceased General Ben Partin, Partin?
No, sir.
All right. Ben Partin, I was fortunate enough to hear his, and you made a description of a gentleman before. General Partin had 3 PhDs and was probably one of the most intelligent men I ever met. But when he gave a program, it was tough to listen to because it was a monotone and it was all the way through. But General Partin did a program on the Oklahoma City bombing, and he was considered the U.S. military's foremost expert on bomb damage assessment. And when Oklahoma City happened, he happened to be in Kansas City, and he talked to one of the seismograph folks there, and they told him that there were 3 explosions in Oklahoma City, not one, but there were 3 separate explosions. And General Partin called the FBI and donated his service, said, I'll be happy. I can be in Oklahoma City very soon. I would be happy. And the FBI said, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, you remember there was like a suspect 2 and a suspect 3, and then they all of a sudden just didn't even bother looking for him anymore.
They disappeared. Here we have. I can't even think of his name now. Who was the guy that they allegedly executed over that?
McVeigh.
Okay,
Yeah.
Timothy McVeigh perpetrates this crime, then gets into his Mercury with no license tags whatsoever and drives down Interstate 40 at 95 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we're supposed to believe that stuff. But there was General Partin went into great detail about Oklahoma City, and I wish he would have been able to do the same thing on 9/11. Unfortunately, he was too old at that time, and his health was not good. But he went into what pressure, pounds per inch, it takes to blossom concrete. to turn it into dust.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you cannot accomplish that with a kerosene fire.
No.
Right. I heard that a couple of the
and-
switches
and-
didn't go. I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say briefly that, when Oklahoma City first happened, eyewitnesses said that there was another man with Timothy McVeigh. And of course, that was dropped from the narrative almost immediately. And, my eldest uncle was in the underwater demolition team in Korea. And when Oklahoma City happened, he knew for certain that a fertilizer bomb could not have caused that kind of damage. Because for one thing, only maybe 15 to 20% of the fertilizer actually ignites. The vast majority of it just ends up being spread all over the place. And so you would have had fertilizer everywhere on the scene of the crime, but of course there was none.
Well,
Wow.
also, Dave, I think it's instrumental. And a point was made before. General Parton says, and he had these great descriptions with the circular patterns out, pounds per square inch, and what that would have generated at each level. And he said, you do realize that the bomb sitting there was an omnidirectional bomb.
Right.
The force was in all directions, was the same. And he said, right across the street from the alleged rental truck was a tree in early April that still had its buds and leaves on it.
Yeah, that's right. And, the local news, when that first happened, reported that another bomb was found in the building that had not exploded.
There was
Right.
actual pictures of the bomb squad there to defuse it.
Yeah,
And then they
The
disappeared.
switches didn't
That's
go.
right.
Like there was a switch deficiency from the ones that supposedly Strassmeyer had sold to those guys. Richard Lee Guthrie was the second suspect guy's name that you were probably referring to.
yeah.
You probably all have seen it, but there's an excellent documentary about Oklahoma City bombing called A Noble Truth. It's really well done.
Mm-hmm.
So
The noble lie.
A Noble Lie. You're right. My bad.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that went on that have eerie parallels to the 90s with what's going on now. That was called the Patcon conspiracy, and like the ATF and the FBI, and they're setting everybody up with the white nationalist thing and everything like that, and the neo-Nazi thing as well. So this is like kind of an entrapment thing, kind of like the Proud Boys. And I've been saying that for almost 4 years now, that those guys were feds at the top level. And I think sadly I was proven right.
The Proud Boys have been a limited hangout from the start. That was never an organic movement in my mind.
No, and isn't it funny that the leader of the Proud Boys, this white supremacist group, isn't remotely white? He's part black and part Mexican. What do you
And
know?
there's another homosexual, like they would tolerate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew it was just an operation, but they're putting a lot of these things out, and they're going to work on people, and that's really it. They're taking the righteous outrage and trying to harness it and hijack it and pivot it towards an ulterior motive, and that's how they've always done it.
Sure, and any group that gets lots of press from the mainstream media is either infiltrated by an intelligence agency or begun by an intelligence agency.
So I hope our listeners are clear that we really do have what you could call the deep state, or a shadow government, or a hidden government, a hidden hand. And at the beginning, Chris, you talked about that these people make deals with the devil, and that this is, by definition, a secret society that operates in secrecy to avoid the facts. And Mike, now that you had told that story about Oklahoma, I do remember that. I guess he was a general, his work. And I did look at those diagrams with the blast capacity omnidirectional from the point of explosion. Did you guys know, are you familiar with, so the idea of the hidden society raises the question, okay, so where are these people? Who are these people? And how do we know? I have an interesting clue. Have you guys heard of the documentary Secrets in Plain Sight by architect Scott Onstadt?
Yes.
No, I've never heard of that.
Okay, so I'll give you an overview, and I recommend it. It's gotten, 20 million views or something like that. Secrets in Plain Sight. So Scott is a professional architect, and he's a professor of architecture, and he wrote in a professional journal the presence of, I think it was the Fibonacci sequence in the design of buildings, the golden rectangle, golden proportions. And after he published that paper, people all over the world sent him additional information, and he's created, I think, 4 documentaries now. So like 10 hours of material, including the Masonic design of Washington, D.C. So if you overlay the design of the streets and you put one of those seeing eye pyramids, the same thing that we have on the back of the dollar, guess where the all-seeing eye aligns to? Not the White House, but further away from the White House at the Masonic Lodge, which is designed as an unfinished or a pyramid without its capstone.
Are you talking about the Supreme Council in D.C.?
I'm not sure what the name of the building is, but it's the biggest one. It's their main thing. It's huge.
Yeah, that's called the Supreme Council, and that's the only place you can go in the country to get your 33rd degree designation, and it's incidentally 13 blocks from the White House.
Hey, Dave, I'd like to also say that I think almost every city on Earth that's been constructed by the Masons has some sort of a key that they can put over a map and line up with, say, the Masonic Temple or some of these key points in every town, and it will show them where these underground and above ground, vice-friendly or Masonic-friendly organizations are, and a lot of these. Well, let's just say stuff that you hear about with the child pedophilia and the sacrifices and stuff. I think a lot of it might go on under these type of pretenses. They did a similar type of thing with the Salem witch trial and things like that, with underground tunnels and establishing alibis and making eyewitnesses look crazy and stuff like that. So it's kind of a similar thing when you hear about Washington, D.C. and all the Comet ping pong and the tunnels underground, or you hear about L.A. or even in Detroit. If you look at the Masonic Temple and what they've got around there. I noticed the same layout in almost every city you go to, and I almost think there has to be something to that.
And if you take a look at,
well, oddly enough, I took a tour of the Supreme Council building, close to 20 years ago, purely by accident. So I got to see every room in that building, at least the rooms that they publicly admit to.
Let me interject before Carl jumps in. In my mind, what is always a tell, like Pizzagate and Oklahoma City, when every mainstream media jumps in unison to dispute and discount the story. Not one even so-called alternative media source will take it up. Then it's being covered up at the highest levels. Yep.
And if you take a look at the symbolism of that building, it has all this Egyptian symbolism, and then Washington, D.C. is perhaps, as we're discovering, its own separate country, similar to the Vatican City, similar to the City of London, and they all have these Egyptian obelisks. So if you go back to who are these people in charge, I think that these are the original power players, these invading, parasitical, hyper-intelligent ET races with the long skulls, who, by the way, if they hang out at the Vatican and they wear those fish hats, nobody's going to be able to tell the difference that they have that elongated skull, which, by the way, if you take a look at some of the, who's that decrepit old guy, that Rothschild? If you take a look at some of the Rothschilds with their long skulls and the bloodlines.
Rothschild, right?
Yeah, with Jacob. So it may be that the Masonic Lodge is one of the secret societies through which this concentrated evil have organized bloodlines. And then they put up their pyramids. And Scott Onstott's work, Chris, if you take a look at Secrets in Plain Sight, he goes all over the world and goes all throughout history that these ley lines, these energy grids have been known and have been used, and coincidentally include in the mathematics of the buildings and the distances, including like the speed of light, the distances, the size of the Earth, the size of the sun, the size of the moon. So it's a remarkably coordinated theory that we're invaded by parasites.
It reminds me of like how they broke down the old world in terms of like the region of, like, say, the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. Those were markations of like the lines of the Anu and then Enlil and Enki. Supposedly each one of them had their own 1/3 of the sky that they ruled over supposedly. So I think they knew about 33rd degrees and like the longitude and latitude back in 3,000 BC, and to have this type of astrological information, it has to come from some sort of either ancient source of wisdom or higher intelligent design, no doubt.
Yes, it is clear that whatever knowledge they had was with exquisite precision of the proportions of this planet. Now, if you want to take a further step back, so where did these people come from? Where did they invade from? Well, okay. If you take a look at the southern hemisphere of Mars, it has been blasted away, okay? Just the southern half. And then you consider the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt may have been a planet that was blown up. And then the few remnants of that society who were off planet made it to Earth, and then unfortunately, apparently, are involved in the same sort of evil control where they consider everything else to be a slave to own and to use and to maximize profit from.
Hey, Carl, have you ever seen that Star of David that appears on like Saturn at the top of the poles or whatever, in the cloud formations or in the atmosphere or something weird like that? I forget what it really was that did it, but like, it makes me think of the saying, like, what is it? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and Jews are from Saturn.
There's
I've
a
never
lot
seen
of
that.
evidence for that. Yeah.
I don't know. There's got to be something to that. That's my theory. I'm stabbing in the dark, but I figure it worked for Hamlet. Might as well give it a shot.
Carl, what's the name? I'm trying to find that guy's documentary. What was his name again? The architect?
Oh, Scott Onstott, Onstott. It's called Secrets in Plain Sight, and it's fascinating. All you got to do is start it up, and you'll be hooked. If you just give it a chance for the introduction, he just lays it out. And he's another one of these guys who, when you listen to him speak, you can tell that this guy is a technical academic, and it's almost not in his capacity to do anything other than to lay out the facts as he has been able to confirm.
Interesting. Hey, Mike, we haven't heard from you in a while. You got anything good for us, man? You want to let it rip?
Well, there's a couple of things I was thinking about as I heard you guys talk. And Giuseppe, you mentioned, of course, that all of the media immediately jumps onto the government version of all of these events, like Oklahoma City, all of the various school shootings and everything else. Are you gentlemen aware of CIA document 1035-960?
Not by number.
All right, I shall, it's not that long, I shall read it for you. It says, and I quote, "Conspiracy theory is a term that strikes fear and anxiety in the hearts of most every public figure, particularly journalists and academics. Since the 1960s, the label has become a disciplinary device that has been overwhelmingly effective in defining certain events as off limits to inquiry or debate, especially in the United States, raising legitimate questions about dubious official narratives destined to inform public opinion, thereby public policy, is a major thought crime that must be cauterized from the public psyche at all costs."
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
This sounds like it's out of
the
Orwell.
Q narrative. It's just the newest incarnation of that old trick, it seems to me.
Well,
Sounds like
the
a
other
page
thing
from
that I wanted to sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to.
Oh, no, that's right. I was just commenting. Go for it, bud.
I was thinking also as we look at these, and I remember very distinctly the year 2010. I was writing for one of the top libertarian websites on the web, and sorry for being redundant, but I wrote an article titled "Comfortable Patriotism," in which I talked about how the government infiltrates all of these movements like we're talking about now, Antifa and others. And I wrote this article and I submitted it for publication. And the gentleman whose name appears on the website sent me an email, and he said, "I can't publish this because this is a clarion call for civil disobedience. And I said, well, I thought that's what we were doing. And he says, no, I can't publish this. Sorry. And 2 days later, I have 2 black SUVs with the FBI in my yard, and they arrived and started asking me questions, and they had a copy of my article, which hadn't been published.
Wow.
And they began to ask me, why are you anti-government? And I said, I'm not anti-government. I'm anti-corrupt government. You know, the one you guys work for.
Nice.
And,
How did that go?
Well, they thought they would play the good cop, bad cop in the beginning. and one of the FBI agents I knew, he was from a nearby state, but I knew him. And he, about halfway through their talk, they asked me if they could come in, and I said no.
Good call.
And they said, well, we would like to have a list of all of the people on your email list. And I said, well, good luck with that. And they said, well, you know that we can get a warrant. And I said, well, that would intimate that you don't have it now.
Right.
And they said, yes. They said, we could, but we could. And one of the FBI agents, his name was Bill Hall, and he was from New Mexico. And he said, of course, this was in Colorado. And Bill says to the other 5 agents who were there, gentlemen, I've seen this man's records, and he's not going to tell us anything. So I talked about how the FBI, the CIA, and other intelligence agencies had infiltrated the Oath Keepers, how they had infiltrated the Richard Max Sheriff's Association, how they had infiltrated so many of these movements. And I said, if you go to any of these meetings, at least 1/3 of the people there are either federal agents or informants. But
yeah, they did that with bike gangs too, Mike. You know, like all
yeah.
the gangs, like the inner city gangs too, the prison gangs too. So yeah, there's a big effort to really infiltrate all departmentalized levels of the rabble.
Oh yes, they will put people in there in a heartbeat, and I've witnessed it firsthand. I was involved in the Minuteman project in Arizona, 2005, on the border, and I watched the infiltrators come in. Once it became a popular exercise, and Lou Dobbs and Sean Hannity came to the border to do programs, then we saw a rapid infiltration of agents provocateur and others.
Well, and it's interesting too how the Oath Keepers now, the mainstream media is calling them a far right extremist group. I found that to be interesting.
Oh yeah, if you know anything about Rhodes, who founded that thing, and if you know anything about how Rhodes interacted with the guys out in Nevada with Clive and Bundy, if you know how they interacted, that's an entirely different show.
Yeah.
Hey, what a cutie!
Hey
there.
She is.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Valentina. Look at how beautiful you are.
Yeah.
You know, there should be an organization that's led by Batak Shitstain Obama, and it should be called the Promise Makers, because that's all they do is just make promises. They never deliver.
Yeah, and talking about the infiltration of groups, the FBI even infiltrated UFO groups back in the 1950s. That's how pervasive this tactic is.
Yeah, the people within that community, they know that, and they can point to them. These are the ones who just want to argue about events that happened 60 years ago and never look at the implications of who's covering it up, who's hiding, and what we might do to be able to unleash the technology that implies that we have through reverse engineering and through capture.
Well, the supposed reason that the UFO groups were infiltrated back in the 1950s, they were concerned that there was communists inside the UFO groups.
Of course, because they're just good Americans upholding the American way.
Yeah.
That would be analogous to Karl Marx worried about communist infiltrators.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is, based on especially what Carl has been saying, is that you can. It's not hard to make a case, a scenario where that type of parasitic alien species never left. They just decided to work in the shadows, not in public. And why is that? If they were such supreme beings, why did they want to now skulk in the shadows?
Yeah, nothing really good works like that in the shadows now, do they? This now innocence behaves, right? It's look at the nature of the relationship. Like I say, this is really how guilt behaves and the contempt historically of this knowledge. If you truly think about it, the contempt that must be necessary to depopulate the innocent population in such a measure, to render them ignorant and then doom them for it. I think that these people are sinister at best, and I think that life is a soul test, and really, it's up to us to really draw a line in the sand and hold these guys accountable for their misdeeds and the way that they've treated us.
Yeah, and if you look at the history as well of how long these beings have been here, and the idea that they have actually experienced planet exterminations. Are you guys up on the work of Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson with the evidence of great floods?
Oh, absolutely. I've studied that quite a bit. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. And again, the evidence in the northwest of the United States is, again, literally rock solid that some huge cosmic collision happened around 12,000 years ago, hitting near where the Great Lakes are, and then exploding into a debris field that the impact zone we can still see today just by taking photographs of the layout of the damage. And then a flood of mammoth proportions, like 10 times bigger than Niagara Falls, cascaded through to the Pacific Ocean through the Northwest. And this is really the megafauna, the 100-pound and over creatures, 90% of them became extinct just like that.
Yeah, the oxygen levels dropped from like 58% oxygen down to like less than 30%, and then continue to go lower to like 25 now. So that could be another thing too. If you think about those larger animals, they probably just, asphyxiated because they didn't have enough air, enough oxygen. Like those big trees and stuff, you think about all that, like the Devil's Tower and stuff like that. They're obviously, some of these things like Yggdrasil, or you hear these tales of these giant trees, and I think that could be a byproduct of a higher oxygen level as well, because carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange and that whole thing, it could cause larger trees and the larger animals and larger humans.
Yeah, if you guys want, I can open up a different topic that I've just been looking into and I'm fascinated in.
Yeah.
Okay, so the idea of great resets in society, all right? So I've been looking at the video works probably 20, 30 hours right now of a guy who has a YouTube channel called John Levi, Jonlevi. And he just takes a look at the photographic evidence of a lost civilization he calls Tartarian, including some of the cities in the United States, in particular Salt Lake City and San Francisco, among many, where if you take a look at the timelines and the stories of people coming in with wagons, and then 15 years later, they have developed a massively expansive city of advanced architectural buildings, which would be physically impossible to construct. So it looks like he's presenting the argument that when they say they found these cities, they literally, it's not founded, they found them. And that there was some sort of extinction event or termination event or something like wiping out the Native Americans, where these people who live there were wiped out and then those cities were repopulated. Have you guys...
Are you? That's cool, man. I never saw this site. This is great. But my question to all of you, are any of you familiar with the archaeological dig that began in the mid-90s called Göbekli Tepe?
Yes, absolutely.
Big time.
Are you familiar with the sister site that's being suppressed called Nesentepe?
No.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. They found decades ago another site kind of shrouded at the base of the Grand Canyon, and there was so much revelation, like intact proof of another civilization, that they flooded it.
You talking about the G.E. Kincaid discovery on the Colorado River, like in that cavern or whatever, with all the old like Oriental type stuff as well, and Scythian treasures. The Smithsonian took it, and basically it's still a no-fly over place still to this day in that area.
And guess what?
That archaeological find actually made the newspaper at the time, and no less than something like 60 agents from the Smithsonian were sent there to clean up the mess, so to speak.
What were you going to say, Carl?
I was going to go with, and then you got to cover, if you're going there, you got to go to Giants and the Smithsonian again, cleaning up those documented remains of human beings.
Well, the interesting thing about the Smithsonian is the original fellow Smithsonian, he was a crypto investigator, and he wanted to amass this collection to be able to review it to reveal it to mankind. And once he died, the inversion from the dark elements within the government turned it into a way to suppress it all.
They don't miss a trick.
Right.
Never let an opportunity go to waste, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, Mike, you got anything for us on this, or anything else you want to talk about here? We're about 35 minutes left. You want to jump into anything good?
No, buddy, I'm just enjoying listening to all this. So you guys have at it. I'm enjoying.
Oh man, hey,
listening.
Yeah, I wanted to actually talk to you about the original 13th Amendment and see what some of your things were, but maybe we kind of went down a different rabbit hole here. But this is really cool nonetheless. And like I say, if you got anything you want to add to this or anything you want to talk about, go for it. But it's a jump ball.
Well, it's a question that I have asked on several occasions and on different programs. But when Alexander Hamilton left the Constitutional Convention in 1787, and he left 5 times and went back to New York, who was he talking to? Because he sent letters to Washington alluding to the fact that he was talking to people and what they would like to see in the Constitution, but he never names them. But who were they?
The representative of the crown?
Oh, come on, Giuseppe. Yeah, I think so.
Aliens?
Well, he was talking to someone because it's documented in his letters back both to Washington and to Rufus King.
Now, hey, have you ever looked into like Rufus King and the King family and all them, and like what was going on in the Buchanan administration, and like it's like a big homosexual like orgy or something that these guys had going on, like between him and Buchanan and all these weirdos. Like it seems to be an old Masonic thing they have going on, like a boys' club.
Well, that is true, and let's not forget about Speed. I think his name was Jonathan Speed, who slept with Abraham Lincoln for a year.
15 years, yeah.
I did not know that.
Slept in the other room, but that dude slept in the same bed. Yeah, it's nuts, isn't it? You know, so I think there's something going on in terms of like compromising these elected officials going back a long, long way.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's as you look into it, and especially what we call our founding era, to look at all of the characters and the roles they played. And, then to look at the monument is that in Chicago, Giuseppe, where they've got Robert Morris and George Washington and the Jewish leader, that monument to them that nobody dares touch?
I believe that is in Chicago, Mike.
And he was a great sponsor of the Revolutionary War monetarily. And then who goes to Philadelphia to create a new constitution, but the people who are the stockholders in the first bank, the Bank of North America. They're going there to ensure they get their money back.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. I mean,
that's wild stuff.
as Eustace Mullins has, documented, and Chris's research, this goes back a long, long way to the Sumeria, Canaan, Babylon days. Jeez, dark.
Well, go back to the money changers. That's in scripture, as we call it. The actions that were taken back then. And then we have William Patterson, who founded the Bank of England in 1694 with the very famous statement, "We will be able to realize profits from money we create out of nothing."
Right. And part of Eustace Mullins' postulate is that there's this race of people that connect to Cain, who have been devoted to lying, cheating, stealing, and killing since literally the dawn of recorded history.
Known liars and thieves, the Gutians, the Judah, they talk about Sanskrit, trail bandits, the Hebrew.
Have you guys looked at the work of Michael Tellinger in South Africa?
Big time.
Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know, I recommend it. And he has lots of videos where he goes to sites, which it looks like those were gold mining areas. And the idea of cymatics for the patterns that are left still this day after 200,000 years for some of these operations that they had. And this goes back to the Sumerian history for the very origins of it. And the creation of human beings as a slave species specifically for the mining of gold. And this again goes back to what Sumerians call their history.
Yeah, look at shekels and how far they go back and how many empires those things have superseded. And they seem to follow this group around too, don't they? Anybody want to jump in there?
Well, I'll share one of the best. The first documentary that opened my eyes was Bill Still's 1996, I believe, The Money Masters, where as a professional journalist, he goes back and tells the story of the origins of our monetary system going back to the Bank of England and before. And I also recommend, let's see, I probably have it on my shelf here if I could see it there. Yeah, I don't remember the guy's name anymore. So the history of money is also fascinating, but Bill Still, The Money Masters is one of them. He also did a documentary on the Wizard of Oz being an allegory to our monetary system. Did any of you guys see that one? Or The Money Masters from Bill Still?
I've watched The Money Masters. It's good.
Yeah, it's long. It's comprehensive. But he did another one talking about that the Wizard of Oz was just an allegory. In the original Wizard of Oz, in the book form, all Dorothy has to do is click her heels to be home. But it's not ruby slippers in the book. It's silver slippers.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
For the key idea at that time would be to free silver up to be able to back the currency. And the idea of what we use for money, really up until the victory of the Federal Reserve, apart from slavery, the idea of who gets to create what we use for money and how was the second most debated topic in Congress after the slavery issue.
Great
John
point.
Sherman.
Yeah.
William Tecumseh's brother John was very much involved in all of that.
Say more, Mike.
Say again?
Yeah, let it rip, Mike. Give us
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
He became, there is a book, and there's a lot of falsehoods in it, but there's a lot of good stuff in it too. And it's called Lincoln Money Martyred. Have you gentlemen ever heard of it?
Nope. It's a good title, though.
Yeah.
Well, it's he has some false documents in there, which, sometimes you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But there is an awful lot of accurate stuff in there, especially, Carl, are you familiar with the Hazard Circular?
That rings a bell, but I don't know what it is offhand.
Okay, it was what was published in England at the very beginning of in 1861 and early 1862 of the Civil War. And that became a, well, if I can find it, give me just a minute, gentlemen, and I'll see if I can find that to read it for you. Jump in there for me, Giuseppe, till I find this hazard circular, please.
Okay. The hazard circular, I know you sent me that. I'm scrolling up on Skype to see if I can find it.
Yeah, I think I know which one that is too.
Well, the hazard circular essentially reveals the game of central banking and the power that they employ and the game that they're really playing. It's really amazing once you hear the exact quote when Mike finds it.
Well, I have it. I have it now. The hazard circular, I quote, "Slavery is likely to be abolished by the war power and chattel slavery abolished. This I and my European friends are in favor of, for slavery is but the owning of labor and carries with it the care of labor, while the European plan, led on by England, is that capital shall control labor by controlling wages. The great debt that capitalists will see to it is made out of the Civil War must be used to control the value of money. To accomplish this, the government bonds must be used as a banking basis. We are now waiting for the Secretary of the Treasury of the United States to make this recommendation. It will not do to allow greenbacks, as they are called, to circulate as money any length of time, as we cannot control that. But we can control the bonds and through them the bank issues." Unquote.
Yep.
Wow.
And of course, the person in Congress who was first in the House and then in the Senate, who was the ramrod behind all this, was John Sherman, William Tecumseh Sherman's brother.
Wow. Excellent. Man, this goes really a long way back with the central bankers into like agrarian feudalism in Europe. If you get into like the sovereign debt and bond markets that come out of Venice and Genoa, you know, like the Prestiti or the Luoghi or the Campari, these are some of the things that they actually did in terms of bonding humans. And the concept of freemen were part of this Masonic guild that were, you know, allowed to go travel from different countries and work in different places as they were commissioned by the Vatican and these elite. So this is kind of like a who's who of compliance and collaboration. And if you really buck the system, then, you know, you're really thrown to the outskirts and to the wolves and blacklisted, just as it was then as it is now.
Hey, Chris, were you aware, I think you and I have discussed this before, were you aware that George Washington required all of the generals in the Revolutionary Army be Masons?
No, I didn't know that, but I don't doubt it. I'm sure they all were.
Yes, and one of the critical parts, I've written 2 chapters on this, but one of the things that was interesting was the fact that when Lafayette came from France and he wanted to command a unit or to command military forces, Washington said only if he became a Mason first.
Yeah, I heard that part. I heard that the DuPont family was real big with not only the French Revolution, but the rise and the destabilization eventually of Napoleon as well.
Well, we can also go, if you want to pull the DuPont family down a little farther, take them into 1933 when they tried to hire the Marine Corps General Smedley Darlington Butler to overthrow the U.S. government and implement fascism. And that was led by I.E. DuPont.
Sure. Look at DuPont. Like they were selling to both sides of the Civil War. I think they provided like 60% of the gunpowder that was used in the Civil War and in like 50% that was used in World War I.
Yes, for all sides. They always provided all sides with the...
That's something.
And Butler caught on to that and wrote War is a Racket. Ironically, Butler was scheduled to become Commandant of the Marine Corps. You know, why is it the Marine Corps doesn't talk about a general who was the recipient of 2 Congressional Medals of Honor and was actually put up for 2 more, which became Navy Crosses? Why do they not talk about that, man? It might be because of that book, War is a Racket.
Well, look at all the campaigns that he was on, man. He's got so much. He knows where so many bodies are buried. He put them there in most cases. and you know who sent him there to put the bodies there. So yeah, he's definitely if he were to develop integrity or some sort of an awareness of this sinister plot, yeah, he could be a very dangerous man, and he could not be given any sort of public credibility. It reminds me of like Louis McFadden and what they kind of did with him, or Huey P. Long, or some of these other populist guys that were opposing the Federal Reserve. Lindbergh would be another example, or the original Cabot Lodge. You know, they ran these guys out of town.
Or Taft.
Taft, yeah.
Don't forget the 1952 election fiasco that the Republicans were able to pull off. Taft and MacArthur were the top running guys, and they were campaigning on doing away with the Federal Reserve.
Wow. I did not know that.
The Republican Party moves in, chops the legs out from under them with deceit, and puts in Eisenhower and Nixon, which is a story, by the way, not to do a overt plug, but it's going to be what DW and I are going to be talking about on our program tomorrow night.
Nice.
You should do overt plugs, though. You should do overt.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, have you ever heard of the Fifth Avenue Treaty, the one between Nixon and Nelson Rockefeller in 1960?
Well, yes, and we're also familiar with what happened to Nixon after he lost the election, which was a fraudulent election engineered in Chicago for JFK. But Nixon could have protested that, but Rockefeller goes to Nixon and says, just be quiet. Your time will come. Here, come and go to work for me. So in 1960, Richard Nixon moves from a small law practice in California to New York City at a $200,000 a year salary, living in a penthouse suite until he's ready to run in 2008. All the while being thoroughly indoctrinated by the Rockefellers and prepared for the presidency.
Wow.
And publicly accused of being bribed by Howard Hughes, who was obviously in orchestration of the deep state and the Mormon Mafia and the CIA and organized crime, obviously.
Absolutely, no doubt. But the story of who brought Eisenhower to prominence is absolutely unreal. I don't know how many... Carl, did you serve in the military?
I did not.
Well, I'm still sure with your knowledge of history, you would understand that how preposterous it was that here was Dwight David Eisenhower at the outbreak of the war, just prior to the outbreak of World War II, and he was a lieutenant colonel with no combat experience whatsoever, and 3 years later, he's a 4-star general.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
Wasn't he one of the guys that was brought in under the National Guard in under Hoover, I think it was, to put down the bonus army, right? Him, MacArthur, and Patton, both, all them guys kind of made their bones out of cavalry school by doing that.
Right, but who supported Eisenhower to the prominence that he reached? He was a nobody. Who brought him up?
Probably one of the Rockefellers, but I don't know.
Good question.
Anna Roosevelt.
Oh, there you go.
FDR's daughter.
Interesting. Yeah, I know the Roosevelts were all over a lot of stuff. FDR had a kid that was involved with politics in the Eisenhower administration and stuff like that too. So makes a lot of sense. And then Kermit Roosevelt and his kids, you know, through Teddy, man, they were involved with the CIA in like Operation FF, Fat Effer, I can't say it on Revolution Radio, Ajax, and some of them other ones, you know, with the CIA, you know, in the early 50s.
Well, look at 1909 when Teddy moved in to knock the pegs out from under Robert Taft.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was all to split the Republican ticket and put Wilson in, right?
Exactly. And then we know what Wilson did.
Yep.
Seems like they had this planned out a little bit, huh? You know.
Let me tell you something. They always plan far in advance. I'm talking, you know, probably 30 to 40 years in advance. They put their plans together.
And then I haven't looked at the source documents, but back to the Masonic Lodge with the Confederate general who was one of the leaders who wrote
Albert Pike.
Yep. And wasn't he the guy who said, all right, we're going to need 3 world wars, but that's what we're going to do?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what he's doing too. It's happening. Just like he said, it's almost like the protocols of the elders of Zion. It's like,
and and they're going after Southern monuments everywhere, but Albert Pike's name is all over the state of Arkansas, and nobody says a word.
Same with DC.
Yes. Yes. And look at whose Southern monument in Louisiana has never been touched.
Big time.
Well, it's
It's
interesting. Pike's
That's
monument in
Judah P.
DC.
Benjamin.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was saying it's
Judah
Judah P.
Benjamin.
Benjamin's monument in Louisiana has never been touched, along with Albert Pike's.
He went into exile to London, right? Didn't he? After
Well,
the Civil War?
he went to France first, and there is a, doing my Southern research, I found out that somewhere near Abbeville, South Carolina, is where that Jefferson Davis was captured by the Union cavalry. And just prior to that, when they left Richmond, according to some documents that I was able to find, when they left Richmond, they had the Confederate treasury with them. And as they saw the Union cavalry getting closer and closer, Jefferson Davis says to Judah P. Benjamin, "Here, take this gold and get around to Texas to I forgot the general's name right now, but anyway, the last resistance in Texas." He said, "Get this money to him so he can keep the resistance going." So Judah P. Benjamin either got to Jacksonville, Florida, or Savannah, Georgia, somewhere in there, and he immediately allegedly took the Confederate gold and went to France.
Not bad. Wow.
So much history that we just do not know. And it's far more fascinating.
Oh, yes, Carl. That's one of the things, my son was talking to me about my 30 years plus of research. And he said, Dad, he says, what do you regret the most? And I said, what I regret the most, son, is that I will never know all that I want to.
Welcome to the club. There's a lot of range to cover, man.
Oh, goodness. And Carl, you hit the nail right on the head. The truth about history is so much more exciting and so much more interesting than the blah, blah, blah. No wonder they put kids to sleep in school teaching history. Not you, sir, but most of the other teachers who are usually coaches who just need a job, who teach history, and you put the kids to sleep. And they have no interest in history from that point on.
True. History does become an acquired taste, and that I had read, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, that among men, their favorite things to watch on television, number one, of course, is sports, but number two was history.
And it's so interesting. And Carl, I know you don't know very much about me, but in the early 1980s, I was assigned to my position at the time in Washington, D.C. Actually, I lived just like right across the bridge into Arlington, Virginia on Wilson Boulevard. But one of my tasks took me to the National Archives and the Library of Congress on a regular basis. And when I started looking into some things, led me, and I had a natural, whatever you would call it, but anyway, I had a leaning towards history. I really wanted to know those things, like you mentioned. And so I would find some documents, and I would have been there 4 or 5 hours, and I would have some free time. And then I would start requesting other documents. And back then they were all on microfiche. You remember that stuff where you had the reader and all the things. I would request some documents. Especially interesting to me were letters between the founders. And because I thought, after I started reading them, because, when I found out that there were 1,200 letters between Jefferson and Madison, I was like, what?
Wow.
And then I said, that's where your history is.
Yeah.
Your history is going to be in those source documents. And then when I started reading this stuff, and I found out that it was in many cases 180 degrees out of phase from what I had been taught in my academic career, it was really interesting. And then you start asking, why are they telling lies? And then it becomes even more interesting when you figure out why they perverted history, why they created, why do you want someone to believe a lie? You want someone to believe a lie so you can deceive them. Pretty simple.
Well, brother, you're going to have to give us the 2-minute elevator version of the content of those letters.
We got 12 minutes. Take them all.
Yeah.
Well, I found what was so interesting, Carl, I know you would find this interesting as well, was that, like, let's take, for instance, between Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe, who were very close. James Monroe was a disciple of Thomas Jefferson. And they had at least 600 letters between them. When did these people, writing letters back then, you didn't have text or email. So here, the letters, Monroe and Jefferson got to the point that they knew that their letters were being intercepted and read, that they started writing in code. And they would put numbers in the beginning indicating what code they were using for that day.
Wow.
And those are extremely interesting to get into how they were decoded. And then one of the most interesting ever was Robert Morris. You familiar with Robert Morris, Carl?
By name, yes.
I know.
Okay, he was the financier of the Revolutionary War.
Oh, yeah,
He was
yeah.
in charge of all of the money. Well, when they were arguing over amendments, Robert Morris writes a letter to Francis Hopkinson, and he says, these Madison is scared to death with the image of Patrick Henry. And Madison has become too gun shy to do exactly what we need him to do. And if certain amendments are passed, I will hang.
Wow.
So when you start admitting that you have committed treason to the point that they will hang you, the question's got to be, what's he done?
Right.
And that became such an interesting study for me.
It's funny that both Papa Bush and Hillary Clinton made basically the same statement, that if they ever find out what we've done, they're going to hang us.
Exactly. And it's true. Of course, they've tried to cover that up about Papa Bush.
Of course, yeah.
Well, and Clinton. And obviously Robert Morris, too.
Well, the letter is in the National Archives, and I have a certified copy of it so that they can't tell me it doesn't exist. It's got the stamp from the National Archives on it.
Yeah, they can't send Sandy Berger in there, right?
To sneak it out.
Pardon me. Back then, the interesting part was, and I can show you guys some pictures of them, I started collecting these documents because I had read 1984. So I started looking at some of these, and I thought, wow. So at that time, you could go get a copy for a nickel. But any copy of the document that you got had to have a red stamp down in the corner, which was actually kind of a picture of the American flag. And it would say either National Archives or Library of Congress, not for resale. But it was an authentic, copy of the original. And now I have had some friends of mine, especially a retired colonel in Colorado, who asked me about one of those documents from the classes I used to teach in Colorado. He said, "Do you still have that document?" I said, "Yes, Colonel, be happy to send you a picture or an email or anything, whatever you need for it." And he said, "I'm just going to call the National Archives and see if they can send me a copy so that I'll have one as well." And I get a call back the next day, and he said, "Mike," he said, "you're probably not going to believe this, but the National Archives told me that is not available anymore."
Jeez.
So 1984 is happening.
I believe it. Look at what Fangs is doing with like the account of history and all that. I mean, they are literally janitors and accessories in these war crimes and malice aforethought in this eugenics program.
Absolutely.
Well, as an educator, if we ever win this Revolution 2.0, if I was asked for my opinion about what should happen with public education, is pretty much to reject all of it as the propaganda from known liars. And I wrote if anybody wants to see my best shot of it, I wrote a series just taking a look at the textbooks and pointing out the lies of omission and commission, the title of which was Public Education, Bullshit to Train Stupefied Work Animals, where I hit
title. Great
yeah,
title.
I hit as hard as I could.
Subtle.
But look, but looking forward, my idea of what we should do with education is just to open up the archives and just to see if anybody can tell us the truth is one of them. But other than that, just to go through the archives, and especially at the Vatican, their library.
Oh man, I was talking about that earlier about the Library of Ashurbanipal in Mosul, and I think that was a big thing about ISIS taking over that weapons cache and that base in Mosul. I think it was more about stuff they might have been finding from the remnants of that, and covering it up or looting that for private collection. More importantly, and just like ISIS was an instrument to gather up black market oil, it probably was to gather up these museum artifacts by the people that sent them out in the first place. So, the private market in this and the mercenaries that are being used, it's 5D chess, and the average person's playing checkers. So it's truly next level stuff. And you got to call it or see it for such, or else you're really going to be horribly mistook.
Here's a question from friend of show, Lark in Texas. Mike, are you familiar with Texas historian Franklin Mattis? I have The Taking of Texas, a documentary history book. Have you heard of Franklin Mattis, Mike?
Yeah, yes, Lark, I have. Send me an email and I'll give you my thoughts on that, sir. Lark, I know you have my email address.
Going deep channel.
No, this is good stuff, man. I'm glad you guys are both on here, and we're kind of talking about anything in the world. It's a jump ball type thing, but hopefully you'll join us again, and we can really get into some more of these topics, because this has really been interesting to take an alternative perspective of history and current events, and to use the wisdom that we have available. Because Mike, you've been studying for a long time. Carl, you as well. Man, this is the stuff that the next generation has really got to take the torch and carry to on, because it's all about bearing witness in the face of this great deception and telling the truth to defend humanity. And this is really so crucial. So thanks, guys, for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, my pleasure. I especially appreciate the audience and their stand for integrity and just to be able to tell the truth. That's the test.
Yeah, great show, Chris. Good mix of guests, and thanks for having me on.
Oh, anytime, Scorpio. You guys are always welcome, and thanks for having me on your shows this week. You guys had some really good shows this week, and man, you're pushing the envelope, and it's good, because we're really seem to be the last line of defense for humanity, and it's good that we're the tip of the spear and doing what we're doing.
We are the last line of defense. It's this is undoubtedly and absolutely a satanic attack on the decent citizens of this planet. And if we can't wake some up, it's gonna get bad.
It's already bad, Giuseppe, I'm afraid.
That's true. It is already
but it's going to get a lot worse.
Yep.
Well, and they plan to keep this going until 2028. It's in their own documents with this SPARS pandemic. I'll have to send you the document, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. I look forward to that.
Okay.
And Chris, final thoughts?
I try not to have any, but no, I think we're going to get carried away by the exit music on Rev Radio. But thanks for tuning in, everybody. Next week, hopefully we'll be talking about some real good stuff as well. And don't have any guests planned, but we'll see how it goes and what we come up with in terms of a panel. And I just appreciate everybody in the chat rooms and sharing the message and lending support in any way that they can. Because it really means the world, and we got to stand together, because if not, we're going to get picked apart one by one.
Yeah, as in the Revolutionary War, we will either hang together or hang separately.
That's right.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, it's better to go out this way than on our knees or compliant with this, this bullshit, because there's really no way of collaborating with this. The only way out is through, and it's not something you can run from. You got to stand and fight.
Yep.
That's right. And we can't just hand the world over that future generations are going to have to face to these psychopaths and purveyors of true, pure evil.
Without question. Yeah, we owe it to the next generation to stop this with ours.
Yeah,
It looks like there's no music coming on at the top of the hour. So
yeah, where's the? I was waiting for that thing to roll in there, man.
No.
Have you heard anything, Giuseppe?
Nope, not hearing a thing. But I do know that this is still the old server, and there was nothing programmed. Jim Fetzer went to bat to get you this slot, and this had been wide open forever, so there was nothing programmed as a pre-May. So I don't even know if somebody comes on at 8 or not. But I guess I can drop the server.
yeah, we better jump
anyway.
off.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Hey,
night,
take care,
everyone.
Mike. Thanks for
Thanks,
coming
everybody.
Good night, Mike.
in. Yep, thanks, Carl. Appreciate you.
Great show,
All right.
Chris. Great show. I love it
Yeah,
when
no, I had fun,
you
man.
bring together interesting, divergent people. You know, Carl and Mike, both historians, but vastly different elements of investigation. It really worked great.
Yeah, definitely. Two different perspectives on the same situation can certainly not hurt. In the immortal words of Bruce Gender, measure twice and cut once.
You mean,
All right.
all right.
Yeah.
Have a great
Yeah,
night.
on that pleasant note, right, guys? But
Yeah.
See you guys.
Okay.
take care, Carl.
Thanks,
Thanks
Thanks,
for
guys.
coming.
Good
Oh,
show,
my
Chris.
pleasure. Thank you.
How we going?
Good to
Thanks,
hear you,
Dave.
Carl. Okay.
Two great
So you guys
guests.
got any good ones lined up for this week or what?
Guests. We're gonna.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a great show. Friday we're having Sean Surplus from Australia and Maleficus, who do a no holds barred weekly, and Sean's got his own radio station, and he has gone through some tough times trying to preach the truth of the traditional path for life, and he's a bright guy, really interesting, and so those two are coming on this Friday for me.
Oh, sweet. Dave, you got anything good lined up?
Yeah, I'm gonna have this guy from Canada, Gurchin, who's an extremely intelligent man, and he's pretty out there, but he's gonna promise to be good on the show. So,
Oh, I love Gurchin. He is intense.
yeah,
That's cool. No, I look forward to it, man. It's be cool stuff. Yeah, man, it's just been so busy this week and probably next week, but I'm going to try to get there as much as I can and drop in on you guys' show if hopefully I'm allowed. And it should be
Always
fun.
allowed. Always allowed.
All right, good.
All right.
Good. All right, guys. Well, hopefully you'll do the same on Saturday. And I think we got is Fetzer this week too, or has he said anything to you or?
Oh yeah, Fetzer is he's a force of nature, and he's a wizard because he seems to keep trying to conjure up a Trump presidency when it doesn't seem like that's in the cards.
Jim's a
Yeah.
machine, so you can count on Jim having shows every week until the bitter end.
Yeah, he's got that Gandalf thing going on a bit there. But you know what? I hope he can will it so, man. And I hope that the white hats really, step up so that we don't have to do this terrible stuff. Because I tell you, war is hell. But, there's a point where humanity really does need to defend itself. And I think that Rubicon has been crossed. It's not one that we've crossed.
Oh, yeah.
It's been crossed against us. And it's not a war that we've waged. It's been a war that's waged against us. And it's a full spectrum assault on everything that's sacred, holy, and natural in this world.
That's
And I
exactly
think it's right. It's up to us to defend it, man. It really is. I don't think you can call yourself a man if you really turn away from this. And it's like people look at this. We got quite a fight in our hands. Can we be on the side of the empire? It's like, it's this cowardice that really needs to be overcome because that's really the saddest aspect that's going on. People letting their implied consent and collaboration with this absurdity is just unacceptable to me, but apparently to them it's normal. So
Well, and I don't see any evidence that the federal government is coming to save us, no matter who is president. Of course, I hope I'm wrong, but the evidence does not point me there. And if the white hats come, then so be it. I'll be happy to say hello and salute. But until
arguably,
then,
Dave, you could say that it's the government that's been doing most of the disruptions that we've seen, whether it's setting up that staged Capitol event and then using it as a justification to go after any sort of resistance to this takeover. So, man, it's truly something.
Well,
it
and
is
it's hard
Orwellian.
to completely excuse Trump from that. You
Yeah,
know,
I agree.
he had to have had some idea something was going to go on.
No doubt.
And it seemed to me like he was sort of a Judas goat in that situation, you know. But the true believers will always excuse Trump's behavior as, you know, playing 5G chess.
You know, if only they fought their true enemies with as much vigor as they fight the people trying to point their true enemies out, I don't think we'd ever have this problem.
That's it. That
Yeah.
is it. Yeah.
Slow Burn says, trust the phlegm.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I'm glad
man.
you're out there, Slowburn. Good stuff, buddy. Yeah, you know, I appreciate Slowburn and everybody that's been sharing my content. I haven't been able to upload on a BitChute in almost a month, man. I don't know if you guys are sharing the same difficulties or not, but my videos say processing and then they just disappear and then they never show up. And I've spent, you know, 2-3 hours a day trying to put these things through, and I don't really have time to keep messing with that. So, you know, at this point, Revolution Radio is my only bastion of free speech. So I'm thankful for Mr. Rowe and everybody that's been working with the technicals to get us back on with the server and up and running, because we have definitely been under attack. I mean, this is ridiculous, some of the stuff they've been doing.
Well, here's what it is. About 1 out of every 8 shows trying to put Jim Fetzer's Need to Know up there, I run into that. You know, it like processes for days and you got to delete it and start over. When I tried to put up my documentary, The Great Lies, COVID-19 and the Great Reset, I couldn't get that thing up for weeks. So there are censors at BitChute, and I finally, I don't know how it finally went up, but I finally got it up. You know, I mean, that literally took 2 weeks where Jim Boom, you know, he has some nutty people on his shows when he does the conspiracy guy or the feds, never a problem, but I don't get it. But, you know, you might want to look at, I'm starting to upload our stuff based on the recommendation from Handsome Truth to Joshua Who, and I can walk you through it, but that is a cool site. It's a little slow, but man, they'll take, you know, so I recommend you put your stuff up there and then you know, link to it on what do you call it? Like however you
Are you putting these videos up on there by any
all
chance?
of them? Yep.
Dude,
Yeah,
that's
yours
great.
was the
Please do.
first one last week.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for putting that up there. And hopefully you'll put this through until we get kicked off of Facebook or wherever else we're on, YouTube or whatever will allow us in terms of platform. I'm sure, you know, I'm kind of a black cloud when it comes to that, and assume, you know, they'll probably strike it down if I'm not there. But whatever, let's ride it till they kick us out.
Right.
We've been kicked out of finer places than this. You know, it's all right.
Exactly. And so far, you know, they keep cutting back our number of subscribers. I mean, back with the original Giuseppe Need to Know, I used to run everything through that, and we were getting near 1,000, and then the next day it was down to 154, and you know, so they govern us, but for whatever reason they're letting them go through for now, which is cool. But you know, that eventually, actually very soon, I got to get with Handsome Truth, and we'll put everything up at Josh Who, and then Josh Who gives you the code to embed into websites. So I got to really work with my wife and learn how to do it myself more, all the HTML website stuff. And then once I know how to do it, I can embed all our shows at our rtidemedia.com website, and you can watch everything there. And similarly, Chris, you start putting up your stuff to Josh Who, I can embed it at Rising Tide Media, and we need to make that be our center hub, because that way we can set up, you know, people who want to monetarily support us. It can all be driven through there, and that's the right way to go. That's what the people who are doing well, like Sarah Westall, Jason Goodman, even others, that's how they do it. They drive through their central hub, which we're not that far away from being able to do that now that we have a stable place to park our stuff with Josh Who.
Yeah, that's cool, man, because I got like 35, 40 videos saved up on this little SD card I got. So that'll work out real nice. I have one from every day. I do this more or less as therapy so I don't develop Tourette syndrome when I leave the house and when I come back. But yeah, it really is helpful to me because I just let it rip for 45 minutes and then I come out the door and go back to my family and start life again. So yeah, it's very therapeutic for me, and it seems to be enjoyable for at least a few people. So hopefully I can educate people and expand their thoughts and really get people thinking and maybe even starting to act in defense of humanity. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, I mean, Rev Radio saved my marriage. My wife was so sick of me ranting to her every day about this stuff. And now I have this outlet. She's happy. I'm happy. We're all happy.
You're being
no,
good
it's
now.
good. Yeah, no, it's helpful, man, to talk with like-minded people as well, like yourself and Dave. So yeah, I'm thankful for everybody that's been on my show and on the panel and been in the chat room and in support of any and everybody's work that's trying to fight for the truth. So good on you.
Yeah, what I recommend is you got a great old posse, Handsome Truth. You got to bring more of those guys on regularly. There were other ones that you know them all. You got to start bringing them on the show.
Yeah, good
Yeah,
idea.
I was glad to get HT on, man. That was sweet. It felt like the good old time. The guys are back in town. So yeah, that was really sweet. Hopefully he'll show up a little bit more. I know he's been pretty aggressive with his schedule, man. This guy stays after it, something fierce. And he's like me too. We're just in our own ways. We kind of march our own path, but we always, every now and again, reach out and talk and shoot the shit and just talk about life. And he's been real helpful to me and a good friend. So yeah, anything I can do for him, and count me in. So, and you guys too, and everybody else that's out there fighting the good fight, man. I think we really got to build a network of like-minded people that are really that get it.
Yeah,
and
that's the
they're
future,
willing
man.
to-
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because really, talking to these sheeple, the people that really have, no intention of understanding what you're trying to explain to them, you're just a wasting your breath. And really, there's people that really want to learn and that are willing to help and willing to do whatever they can. And those are the people you really got to look for and find and cherish, because really, that's the 3%, the critical mass that will save humanity.
Couldn't agree more. Yep.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Good show, Chris.
Sweet.
Excellent.
Yeah, really good
Appreciate
show.
you both. Yeah,
All right.
cool, guys. All right,
Good.
talk to you guys probably Monday or Wednesday for sure.
Yeah.
Right on.
Right on, man. You guys have a good night.
Take care. Have a good night.
Okay.